Essential question: how did African Americans cope with their lack of freedom and treatment? By Domingo Gonzalez and Lauren Chris Perez. No issue has scarred a country more than slavery. Before the Civil War, nearly 4 million black slaves toiled in the American South. Few slaves accepted their lack of freedom or enjoyed life on the plantation. As one ex-slave put it, no day dawns for the slave, nor is it looked for. It is all night, night forever. For many, the long nights of slavery only ended in death. Slaves had no constitutional rights. They could not testify in court against a white person. They could not leave the plantation without permission. Slaves often found themselves rented out, used as prizes in lotteries, or as wagers in card games and horse races. Separation from family and friends was probably the greatest fear a black person in slavery faced. They worked at all sorts of jobs throughout the slaveholding South, but the majority were field hands on relatively large plantations. Men, women, and children served as field hands. The owner decided when his slave children would go into the fields, usually between the ages of 10 and 12. Only when the slaves finally finished working for their master could they return to their own crude cabins to tend to their own family needs. Slaves lived in cabins called the quarters. Usually bare and simple, these shelters were cold in winter, hot in summer, and leaky when it rained. Slave food was adequate but monotonous, consisting of mainly cornbread, salt pork, and molasses. The master also usually provided a winter and summer set of clothes, often the cast-offs of white people. The lives of black people under slavery in the South were controlled by a web of customs, rules, and laws known as slave codes. Slaves could not travel without a written pass. They were forbidden to learn how to read and write. They could not be searched at any time. They could not buy or sell things without a permit. They could not own livestock. They were subject to a curfew every night. How did the slaves react to the whippings, the endless labor for others' profits, and the lack of freedom? Some, like Nat Turner, rebelled. In 1831, he led a slave revolt that left nearly 60 white persons dead in Virginia. Such insurrections were relatively rare in the South. White people outnumbered slaves in most places, possessed firearms, and could call on the power of the government to suppress rebellions. Nevertheless, slaves everywhere found ways to resist their bondage. They sabotaged tools and crops, pretended illness, and stole from the food from the master's own kitchen. The most effective way that a slave could retaliate against an owner was to run away. It is estimated that 60,000 black people fled slavery before the Civil War.